Assalamualaikum and a very good day to everyone. Today we are going to look at writing, and the objective is by the end of the lesson students should be able to write for different moods and expression. We are going to look at cause and effect, second compare and contrast, and lastly express points of views.
Are you often wondering about the correct linking word to express a cause and effect relationship? Are you uncertain how to use expressions such as since, therefore, or due to? Then join me in this lesson for a review of the most common linking words we use to express cause and effect. Hello and welcome everyone. This is Minu at AngloLink. Today we're going to review words and expressions that join two clauses with a cause-effect relationship. These are words and phrases like because, since, as, therefore, consequently, because of, and due to. We will look at how they join two clauses to each other and also which ones are more appropriate for spoken English and which ones are more appropriate for written English. We'll finish with a gap-filling exercise so you can test your assimilation. By the end of the lesson, you will have mastered the use of these words in both spoken and written English. So when you're ready, we can begin. Linking words of cause and effect. We can divide the most common linking words and expressions of cause and effect into four groups. The first group is the coordinating conjunctions, for cause and so for effect. The second group is subordinating conjunctions. These are because, since, and as for cause. The third group is conjunctive adverbs. These are therefore and consequently for effect. And finally, prepositions, because of, and due to, which express a cause. Right, let's start by looking at coordinating conjunctions for and so. A coordinating conjunction comes between two main or independent clauses. In written English, you must put a comma before the conjunction. For example, a great number of people purchase it, for it's reasonably priced. Be careful that the conjunction for is very formal and only appropriate in formal written English. Okay, let's have a look at the conjunction so. This is for expressing an effect. For example, it's reasonably priced, so everyone buys it. So is the most common conjunction to express an effect in spoken English. However, it is not appropriate in written or formal English. Right, moving on to subordinating conjunctions, because, since, and as. These conjunctions join a main or independent clause and a subordinate or dependent clause to each other. For example, everyone buys it because, or as, or since it's reasonably priced. In written English, if you start with the subordinating clause, you must separate the two clauses with a comma. Because, since, as it's reasonably priced, comma, everyone buys it. As and since are more formal than because. However, all three can be used for both speaking and writing. Okay. Moving on to the third group, conjunctive adverbs, therefore and consequently. Conjunctive adverbs join two main clauses to each other. In written English, you can separate the two clauses either with a semicolon or with a full stop. Full stop is better when the subordinate clause is long, and make sure you put a comma after the adverb. For example, it is reasonably priced, semicolon, therefore, comma, a great number of people purchase it. Or, it is reasonably priced and offers exceptional quality as well, full stop, consequently, comma, a great number of people purchase it. Therefore and consequently are formal and appropriate in formal situations and written English. A little note for you concerning hence and thus, which are also conjunctive adverbs. These two conjunctive adverbs are sometimes used as even more formal synonyms for therefore. However, their usage is restricted to very formal and specific contexts. Although it is important to understand them when you occasionally come across them, I would recommend that you do not use them as synonym for therefore yourself. Right then, and finally, we have prepositions because of and due to. These expressions are not conjunctions, they are compound prepositions. Therefore, they need to be followed by a noun or the gerund form of a verb, not by a clause. For example, everyone buys it because of or due to. You must not say because of or due to it is reasonably priced. You need to change that clause into either a noun like price, so everyone buys it because of its reasonable price. Everyone buys it due to its reasonable price. Or you can use the gerund. So everyone buys it because of or due to it being reasonably priced. Because of and due to are synonyms. Because of is common in both formal and informal English, and due to is more formal and therefore more appropriate in formal situations and written English. If you start with a prepositional phrase, you must separate the two clauses with a comma. So if you say, because of its reasonable price, everyone buys it, make sure that you put a comma after price. Or, due to it being reasonably priced, comma, a great number of people purchase it. Now, an important note here, notice that when the subjects of the two clauses are different, you must leave the second subject before the gerund. Let's look at the sentence again. Everyone buys it because it is reasonably priced. So the first clause has the subject everyone. The second clause has the subject it. Therefore, you need to keep both subjects in your sentence. Everyone buys it because of it being reasonably priced. Now, if the main clause and the subordinate clause have the same subject, you can drop the subject before the gerund. So, it is bought a lot because it is reasonably priced becomes it is bought a lot because of being reasonably priced. Okay, a couple of more notes here. The first thing, if you prefer to use a clause, you can add the expression the fact that. You can say everyone buys it because of the fact that it is reasonably priced. And the second note, other compound prepositions. Other compound prepositions that may be used in formal cause and effect sentences are owing to and thanks to. Thanks to always has a positive connotation. For example, a potential disaster has been avoided owing to or thanks to the diligence of the technical team. Okay, that's all for the lesson. Let's finish with some exercises. Right. I want you to use the linking word in brackets to formulate the same idea as the original sentence containing so. For example, I'm tired, so I'm going to bed. because. I'm going to bed because I'm tired. Or, if you start with the subordinate clause, because I'm tired, I'm going to bed. Right then, let's start with number 1, practicing subordinate conjunctions because, since, and as. There were no buses, so we had to take a taxi. Because. We had to take a taxi because there were no buses. Or, because there were no buses, we had to take a taxi. Number 2. We had booked the tickets well in advance, so they were cheap. Because. The tickets were cheap because we had booked them well in advance. Or, because we had booked them well in advance, the tickets were cheap. Number 3. The report was incomplete, so it was rejected. Since. The report was rejected since it was incomplete. Or, since it was incomplete, the report was rejected. Number 4. No one picked up the phone, so I had to leave a message. As. I had to leave a message as no one picked up the phone. Or, as no one picked up the phone, I had to leave a message. Okay, let's practice the conjunctive adverbs therefore and consequently. Number 5. Our prices are highly competitive, so we cannot offer any discounts. Therefore. Our prices are highly competitive, therefore we cannot offer any discounts. Or you can punctuate differently. Our prices are highly competitive, full stop, therefore we cannot offer any discounts. Six. They are short of staff this week, so they are behind with orders. Consequently. They are short of staff this week. Consequently, they are behind with orders. Notice the semicolon and the comma. And now let's look at the alternative punctuation. They are short of staff this week. Full stop. Consequently, comma, they're behind with orders. Okay, let's look at prepositions because of, due to, owing to, and thanks to. Number 7. He's competent, so he's been promoted. Because of. He's been promoted because of his competence. So here we have used a real noun, competence. You could switch the sentences round. Because of his competence, he's been promoted. Now try and use the gerund. He's been promoted because of being competent. Or you can switch the clauses round. Because of being competent, he's been promoted. Number 8. There were some technical issues, so they delayed the launch. due to. They delayed the launch due to some technical issues. Or, due to some technical issues, they delayed the launch. Now try and use the gerund. They delayed the launch due to there being some technical issues. Notice, because the two subjects are different, we have had to repeat the subject there before the gerund being. And we can swap the two clauses. Due to there being some technical issues, they delayed the launch. Number 9. Our budget has been reduced, so we have to abandon the project. Owing to. We have to abandon this project owing to the reduction in our budget. Or, owing to the reduction in our budget, we have to abandon this project. Okay, let's do it with the gerund. We have to abandon this project owing to our budget being reduced. Notice again that there are two different subjects, and therefore the second subject, our budget, is repeated before the gerund being. You can swap them round. Owing to our budget being reduced, we have to abandon this project. Okay, and finally, number 10. I had a good instructor, so I passed my driving test. Thanks to. I passed my driving test thanks to my good instructor. Or, thanks to my good instructor, I passed my driving test. Now try the sentence with the gerund. I passed my driving test thanks to having a good instructor. Or, thanks to having a good instructor, I passed my driving test. Right, that's the end of this lesson about the linking words of cause and effect. I hope you enjoyed it. As you know, you can now go to our website, anglolink.com, for more lessons and exercises. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in my next lesson. Bye now.
Now let us watch a video on cause and effect. Writing for different modes and expression, cause and effect. The cause and effect models allow students to understand the relationship between the causes that result in an effect. This literacy tool can be used in a variety of subjects to help students comprehend when actions and reactions occur. Within a piece of literature, history texts, science experiments, and etc. There can be one or several causes and effects. In highlighting this, students can deepen their reading comprehension. Students can independently or in a group create charts to map out these connections when reading. Writers use the language of cause and effect to educate or influence the reader throughout their learning. Key clues words for students: if, then, reason, why, as a result, therefore, because, consequently, since, due to, thus, this has led to. The main objective of this literacy tool is to highlight the relationship of a specific cause and effects. Students can create charts to showcase many cause and effects relationships or to discern one key concept. By showing the reason for, why an event happened, the student is then able to understand the connection of the effects which stems from the cause. The sequential structure is informative and can be personalized to fit individualized or group reading as well as whole class discussion. Here is an example of cause and effect chart.
This lesson is going to review how to write a comparison and contrast paragraph. So first of all, what is it? Well, if we're comparing, we're looking at similarities between things, so how things are the same. And if we're contrasting, we're looking at the differences between things. So a comparison and contrast paragraph is going to explain how two people, places, or things are both alike and different. And it's really important when you do this type of writing that you make sure that you include how they're alike and how they're different. You can't just do one or the other. You need to cover both when you're comparing and contrasting. So the process that you're going to follow to write one of these paragraphs. First of all, you need to choose two related subjects. Don't choose two subjects that are completely unrelated, because if you do that, it's going to be really hard to compare them. It's going to be really hard to find similarities. So choose two related subjects that you know that you can find some similarities and some differences. Then plan creating a Venn diagram. And we're going to take a look at a Venn diagram in a moment. Then you're going to include your topic sentence. In your topic sentence, make sure that you include both topics that your paragraph is going to cover. So you want your reader to know exactly what it is you're going to compare and contrast. Follow your topic sentence with your supporting details, so all of those ways they're the same and all of those ways that they're different. And make sure that you group those details together in some way that makes sense. So for instance, maybe you want to start your paragraph with how your two subjects are the same, and then you want to say how they're different. Or maybe you want to say how they're different first and then how they're the same. But make sure that you group them together. Don't jump around all over the place, because your reader will have a hard time following your writing. It also helps your reader if you include clue words, so phrases like on the one hand or on the other hand. That shows differences. A word like both shows the similarities between the two. So think about clue words that you can use when you write that will give your reader a good idea of whether you're showing a similarity, whether you're comparing, or whether you're showing a difference, whether you're contrasting. Okay. As I said, when you plan, you want to plan using a Venn diagram. Just in case you don't remember the Venn diagram, as you can see from this slide, it is the two circles that overlap. On the left-hand circle, topic A, in that blue area, you would list all of the things about topic A that are distinct to topic A, so that topic B doesn't have. And in the purple circle, all the way on the right-hand side, you would list all of the things that topic B has that topic A doesn't. So the outsides of the circles are for differences. Then, in that middle area, that place where the two circles overlap, that's where you put the things that topic A and topic B have in common, or their similarities. This graphic organizer, make sure that you complete it before you write your paragraph, because it will help you to make sure that your thoughts are organized.
Now let's look at a video on compare and contrast. For compare and contrast, the ability to compare and contrast has its uses far beyond the classroom, with a practical application in everything from choosing which insurance policy to buy to what clothes to pack for a holiday. Comparing and contrasting are requirements for much of our everyday decision making. However, when we discuss these terms in relation to reading skill, they have much more specific meanings. Compare in in relation to reading refers to the process of identifying the similarities and differences between two things. On the other hand, contrast refers to identifying only the differences between two things. While the distinction between these two terms may appear on the surface to be quite subtle, it is important that students can accurately differentiate between the two concepts to ensure they are able to answer questions and prompts accurately. In compare and contrast, helping students to approach compare and contrast question, the first step is to analyze the question. As mentioned in the introduction to this article, it is important students clearly understand what exactly the question is asking them to do. To achieve this effectively, students must break the question into its simplified parts. For example, the question asks a student to contrast the opinions of two critics on the use of metaphor in a poem. Students need only focus on the parts of the text where the critics deal with metaphor. And furthermore, students need only focus on where these two opinions differ. On the other hand, if the questions ask students to compare the views of the two critics, they must focus on both similarities and differences in their answers. Step 2 is identifying similarities and differences in the content. Once students have identified the purpose of the writing prompt or the nature of the question, they can start to read the text and take note of the similarities and differences in terms of content. Students can begin the process by highlighting or underlining the appropriate information in the text. They can then record this information in note form or bullet points. These are often sufficient for students to prepare for writing their answer. However, it is often helpful for students to use graphic organizers to visually display the information they extract. Venn diagrams are particularly suitable for displaying comparison as they can usefully display areas of difference, as well as overlapping similarities. Venn diagrams can easily accommodate a comparison of multiple ideas through the additions of circles in the diagram. Here is an example of Venn diagram. Step 3. Identify similarities and differences in the structure. Once students have examined and identified the similarities and differences in terms of content, they can begin to look at how the context compare and contrast in regards to structure. This will require students to give consideration to the genre of each text. Often, students are asked to compare texts that are in the same genre. Sometimes, however, they will be asked about texts which share a common theme, but presented in different genres. Depending on the exact nature of the questions, students may look at a variety of elements of structure, including how the text is presented in terms of 1. The length of sentences and paragraph. Second, the progression of ideas and argument. Third, the point of view expressed, either informative or emotional. The use of stylistic elements such as irony, humor, emotional appeals, etc. The setting, the characters, and plot in fiction. Lastly, the use of fact and statistic in non-fiction. Step 4. Identifying similarities and differences in media. Advances in technology make it ever more important that students develop their literacy skill in media beyond the printed word. When we think of students reading a text, we must ensure we recognize that text can be visual and audio in nature too. As part of learning to compare and contrast text, students should be offered opportunities to compare text in variety of media. Many of the texts students will encounter, whether in print or online, will contain information presented in a variety of ways, including diagram, charts, photograph, and illustration, to name a few. Online texts especially may contain embedded videos and audio tracks. These elements should not be ignored as they are an intrinsic part of how the text operates, and therefore students should be prepared to compare and contrast these two.
Point of View Part 1, Video and Worksheet. In this video, you're going to learn about different points of view, including first person, second person, and third person point of view. While you listen to the video, use the worksheet to take notes and practice. So what is point of view? Point of view is the perspective or eyes a story is told from. So for example, here's our narrator. The narrator is the person who tells the story. The area shown in blue is the narrator's point of view. The point of view includes everything that the narrator sees from the angle of her eyes. Let's look at another point of view. Here's a child who wants to play with the other children. His point of view is shown in green. He sees the same things as the girl, but if he's the narrator, the story will be a little different because his point of view is a little different from hers. Here's one more interesting point of view. The point of view of a bird in the sky. And again, even though the bird is looking at the same things as the girl and boy narrators, his point of view is totally different from theirs. Now let's look at three narrators that show us the different types of point of view. There's narrator 1, narrator 2, and narrator 3. Narrator 1 says, "I was sad. I felt nervous. I didn't want to tell my mom that I broke the window in my room." Look how his words are different from the words of narrator 2. You were sad. You felt nervous. You didn't want to tell your mom that you broke the window in your room. And then let's look at how both of these narrators differ from narrator 3. He was sad. He felt nervous. He didn't want to tell his mom that he broke the window in his room. What are the major differences in narrators 1, 2, and 3? One major difference is that narrator 1 uses first-person pronouns like I and my. Narrator 2 uses second-person pronouns you and your. And narrator 3 uses third-person pronouns he and his. Narrator 1 uses the first-person point of view. That means narrator 1 is actually talking about himself, not only other characters. Narrator 2 uses what we call the second person point of view. Narrator 2 is talking directly to the reader using the pronoun you. Narrator number 3 is using the third person point of view, talking about other people in the story. So the three main types of point of view are first person point of view, second person point of view, and third person point of view. So let's put what we've learned into a table. First person point of view uses pronouns I, my, we, our, me, and us. For example, I was sad. I felt nervous. The narrator speaks about himself or herself. This means that the narrator is usually also the main character of the story. In second person point of view, the narrator uses pronouns you and your. For example, you were sad. You felt nervous. The narrator speaks directly to the reader. Remember that second person point of view is rarely used in stories. And finally, third person point of view uses third person pronouns like he, she, it,
they, his, her, and their. In third-person point of view, the narrator watches the story, but is not in the story. So our narrator says he looks sad, he seemed nervous. Notice he's talking about a boy he sees, but he's not talking to the boy, and he's not interacting with the boy. That's because this narrator is not in the story. He's just watching the story and telling us about it. Third-person point of view narrators speak about other characters, but not himself or herself. Most stories use this point of view. Also note that there are different types of third-person point of view. In this video, I won't teach about the different types. To learn about those, watch Point of View video part 2. Now let's practice what we've learned about first, second, and third-person point of view. Practice number 1. These words are taken from Hoot, Chapter 1, by Carl Hyacin. Being the new kid, Roy always sat alone at the end of the table whenever he was in the cafeteria. Roy was an old pro at being the new kid. Trace Middle was the 6th school he had attended since he started going to school. Coconut Cove was the 10th town his family had lived in since Roy could remember. Question 1. The point of view is A. First person, B. Second person, or C. Third person. Question 2. How do you know? For question 1, just circle the correct answer. For question 2, you can refer back to the chart that we completed right before these questions. Record your answers and pause the video while you work. We'll check all the answers in just a moment. Practice number 2. These words are taken from If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, Chapter 1, by Italo Calvino. Well, what are you waiting for? Stretch your legs. Go ahead and put your feet on a cushion, on 2 cushions, on the arms of a sofa, on the wings of a chair. Take your shoes off first. If you want to, put your feet up. If not, put them back. Question 1. The point of view is A. First person, B. Second person, or C. Third person. Question 2. How do you know? Pause the video while you answer the questions, and we'll check them in a moment. Practice number 3. These words are taken from the story The Girl with No Past, Chapter 4, by Catherine Croft. I wanted to tell her that I was happy with how I lived. My actions didn't affect or hurt anyone around me, and I was free in a way she could never understand. But I was beginning to doubt this myself. When our time was up, I shook Dr. Redfield's hand, promising to keep my appointment next month. Question 1. The point of view is A. First person, B. Second person, or C. Third person. Question 2. How do you know that? Pause the video while you work, and we'll check the answers in a moment. Practice number 4. These words are taken from the story Guardians of Gahuli, Chapter 11, by Catherine Lasky. The 2 little owls looked at each other and moved their beaks, turning the sound of their numbers into something that might pass for a name, any name but their own. And now, tonight, they would try the second part of their strategy for the first time. Question 1. The point of view is A. First person, B. Second person, or C. Third person. Question 2. How do you know that? Pause the video while you work, and we'll check the answers in a moment. Now let's check our answers. Practice number 1, question 1. The point of view is third person. How do we know that? Because the narrator uses third person pronouns he and his. They're underlined here. Also, the narrator watches the story, but is not in the story. We know he's watching the story because he's talking about the new kid Roy.
The narrator says, being the new kid, Roy always sat alone at the end of the table whenever he was in the cafeteria. But we know the narrator isn't in the story because
he isn't talking to Roy, he isn't in the cafeteria with Roy, he's just telling the reader about Roy. Finally, the narrator tells about other characters, but not himself. So he's observing Roy and he's telling about Roy, but he's telling us nothing about himself.
When a narrator does that, the point of view is third person.
Practice number 2. Question 1. The point of view is second person. Question 2. How do you know that? First, the narrator uses second person pronouns you and your. Here they are. And secondly, the narrator speaks directly to the reader using these pronouns.
So in the first sentence where the narrator says, well, what are you waiting for? Stretch your legs. Go ahead and put your feet on a cushion, on 2 cushions. In these sentences, see how the narrator uses the words you and your? That's because the narrator is speaking directly to the person reading the story. That means the narrator is speaking to you and me.
When the narrator speaks directly to the reader, we know that the narrator is using second person point of view. Practice number 3. Question 1. The point of view is first person. Question 2. How do you know that? We know because the narrator uses first person pronouns like I and my. Here they are.
Let's reread her words. I wanted to tell her that I was happy with how I lived. My actions didn't affect or hurt anyone around me.
The narrator uses those pronouns because the narrator is speaking about herself. This tells us that the narrator is the main character in the story. When the narrator talks about him or herself using the pronouns I, my, and other first-person pronouns, and the narrator's the main character, that means that the narrator is using first-person point of view. Practice number 4, question 1. The point of view is third person. Question 2. How do you know that? We know that because the narrator uses third-person pronouns they and their.
The narrator uses these pronouns to tell about the characters, the owls. The narrator says, the 2 little owls looked at each other and moved their beaks, turning the sound of their numbers into something that might pass for a name.
Here, the narrator is watching the owls and telling the reader what the owls are doing. But the narrator isn't talking to the owls or interacting with the owls. The narrator isn't in the action of the story. He's just telling us the action of the story. Finally, the narrator tells about other characters, but not about himself. When the narrator is watching the story and not in it, and talking about other characters but not himself using third-person pronouns, that means that the narrator uses third-person point of view. The end. Our lesson on point of view is complete. I hope this video helped you understand what point of view is and how to identify each point of view. Watch Point of View Part 2 to learn the different types of third-person point of view.
Now, let's look at a video on point of view.
Point of View Part 2, Video and Worksheet. In the last video, Part 1, we learned about the 3 main points of view, first person, second person, and third person. In this video, Part 2, we're going to learn about the 3 types of third-person point of view. They are called third-person objective, third-person limited, which is also called third-person subjective, and third-person omniscient. Let's quickly review. What is point of view? Point of view is the perspective or eyes a story is told from. We have the narrator, and everything in blue is the narrator's point of view. I'm going to very quickly review the 3 main types of point of view from video 1. A narrator using first-person point of view will use first-person pronouns I, my, we, our, me, and us. This narrator will speak a lot about himself or herself. This narrator is also usually the main character of a story. A narrator using second-person point of view will use a lot of second-person pronouns like you and your. This narrator will be speaking directly to the reader. This point of view is rarely used. Finally, a narrator using third-person point of view will use a lot of third-person pronouns like he, she, it, they, his, her, and their. Most stories use this point of view. There are 3 types of third-person point of view that you're about to learn. So here we have 3 narrators, and all 3 are third-person point of view. But each is a different type of third-person point of view. Let's read their words and see if you can tell how their words are different. Each narrator is telling a story. The story is about a boy and something the boy did.
So the first narrator says, "He looked sad. He seemed nervous. He said he didn't want to tell his mom that he broke the window. When he finally told her, she seemed calm." The second narrator says, "He was sad. He felt nervous. He didn't want to tell his mom that he broke the window. But when he finally told her, she seemed calm." And the third narrator says, "He was sad. He felt nervous. He didn't want to tell his mom that he broke the window. When he finally told her, she felt calm." There are small differences in the words of each narrator. Can you see what they are? Let's compare the first two narrators. How are these two narrators different? The first narrator says about the boy that he looked sad. He seemed nervous. He said he didn't want to tell his mom that he broke the window. But the second narrator says he was sad. He felt nervous. He didn't want to tell his mom that he broke the window. Can you tell how the narrators are different? I'll give you a hint. One of the narrators knows more than the other one. Which narrator knows more? The answer is that the second narrator knows more. Here's why. Narrator 1 doesn't know the boy's thoughts, but narrator 2 knows the boy's thoughts.
How can we be sure that this is true? Because a few words by each of the narrators prove it's true. Let's look.
The first narrator says the boy looked sad. The second narrator says the boy was sad. Do you see the difference?
When do we say someone looked sad? Think about yourself. If you said the words, "he looked sad," about a boy, does that mean that you know the boy's sad, or does that mean you think the boy is sad? That means you think he's sad. What about, "he was sad"? When would you say that? You would say that when you know for sure that the boy feels sad. This is how we know that narrator 2 is the one who knows more. Narrator 2 is the one who knows how the boy feels.
What about the third narrator? How is this narrator different from the others? First, does the third narrator know how the boy feels? He says about the boy, he was sad. He felt nervous. He didn't want to tell his mom that he broke the window. Yes, the third narrator knows how the boy feels, not just how the boy seems to feel. Now, let's look at the character of the mom. Which narrators know how the mom feels and what she thinks? The first narrator and the second narrator say that when the boy finally told her about the window, she seemed calm. Do the first and second narrators know how the mom feels? No, they don't. They know how she seems to feel. How about the third narrator? The third narrator says, when the boy finally told his mom about the window, she felt calm. The third narrator knows how the mom feels. So that's how this narrator is different. This narrator knows the boy's and the mom's thoughts. Let's write the information that we just discussed. So the first narrator, does this narrator know the boy's thoughts?
No, he doesn't.
What about the mom's thoughts?
No, he doesn't know her thoughts either.
Look at the second narrator. Does this narrator know the boy's thoughts? Yes. And what about the mom's thoughts? No, this narrator does not know the mom's thoughts. And what about the third narrator? Does this narrator know the boy's thoughts? Yes. And what about the mom's thoughts? Yes, this narrator also knows the mom's thoughts.
So our first narrator doesn't know the thoughts of the boy or the mom. This narrator uses third-person objective point of view. In third-person objective point of view, the narrator knows no character's thoughts. The second narrator knows the thoughts of the boy, but not of the mom. This narrator uses third-person limited point of view. In this point of view, the narrator knows one character's thoughts, but no one else's. Third-person limited points of view is sometimes called third-person subjective. Finally, Our third narrator knows the thoughts of all characters, in this case both the boy and the mom. This is called third-person omniscient point of view. In this point of view, the narrator knows all characters' thoughts and opinions. Let's put this information into the table. So remember that all third-person point of view narrators use pronouns like he, she, it, they, his, her, and their. Third-person objective point of view involves a narrator who knows no character's thoughts. For example, he looked sad, he seemed nervous. This narrator sees the boy, but he doesn't know how the boy feels or what he's thinking. In third-person limited point of view, also called third-person subjective point of view, the narrator knows one character's thoughts, but not the thoughts of other characters. For example, he felt sad, he was nervous, but his mother seemed calm. In this example, the narrator speaking knows the thoughts of the boy, but not the thoughts of the mom. Finally, there's third-person omniscient point of view. In this point of view, the narrator knows all characters' thoughts, feelings, and opinions. For example, he was sad, he felt nervous, but his mother was calm. This narrator knows the thoughts of the boy and the thoughts of the mom. Those are both characters in the story, so this narrator is using third-person omniscient point of view.
Now let's practice identifying third-person objective, limited, and omniscient point of view. Practice number 1 from Harry Potter, Chapter 1 by J.K. Rowling. Harry Potter was a wizard fresh from his first year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and if the Dursleys were unhappy to have him back for the holidays, it was nothing to how Harry felt. He missed Hogwarts so much that it was like having a constant stomachache. Question 1. What is the point of view? Question 2. How do you know that? Go ahead and record your answers, and we'll check them in a moment. Pause the video while you work. Practice number 2. From Magic Treehouse number 37, Dragon of the Red Dawn, by Mary Pope Osborne. Great, said Jack. He hoped they would be safer away from the heart of Ado. Then maybe they could focus on their search for the secret. Jack, Annie, and Basho joined the crows crossing the bridge. What's that mountain? Said Annie. She pointed to a snow-capped mountain looming in the distance. Question 1. What is the point of view? Question 2. How do you know that? Write your answers and pause the video while you work. Practice number 3. From Hoot, Chapter 2 by Carl Hyacin. Of all the places the Everharts had lived, Roy's favorite was Bozeman, Montana. Roy had never imagined anywhere so beautiful. Roy wanted to stay forever. His mother assured Roy that he would love Florida. Everybody in America wants to move there, she'd said. Then, Roy's father had poked his head in the door and said, with somewhat forced enthusiasm, and don't forget Disney World. Question 1. What is the point of view? Question 2. How do you know that? Practice number 4. From the story Two Bad Ants, Chapter 1 by Chris Van Allsburg. A scout had returned with a remarkable discovery, a beautiful sparkling crystal. When the scout presented the crystal to the ant queen, she took a small bite, then quickly ate the entire thing. She deemed it the most delicious food she'd ever tasted. Nothing could make her happier than to have much, much more. The ants understood. They were eager to gather more crystals. Question 1. What is the point of view? Question 2. How do you know that? Pause the video as you write your answers, and then we'll check the answers to all 4 questions next. Are you ready to check your answers? Practice 1 from the story Harry Potter. Question 1. What is the point of view? The answer is third-person omniscient. Question 2. How do you know that? First, how do we know that the point of view is third person rather than second or first person? We know it's third-person point of view because of the pronouns. This narrator uses third-person pronouns his, him, and he. Now, if the narrator were using first-person pronouns like I, my, we, and our, we'd know that was first-person point of view. Or second-person pronouns like you and your, That would be second person point of view. But this one is using third person pronouns. Another reason that we know it's third person is because this narrator is watching the story, but not in the story with the characters. If the narrator were in the action of the story with characters, this narrator would be talking to the characters and doing other things with the characters. But this narrator isn't doing that. This narrator is watching the characters from a distance, watching their actions and their thoughts, and then telling readers about that information. That means that this narrator is using third person point of view. That's why it's third person, but how do we know it's third person omniscient rather than third person limited or third person objective? We know it's omniscient because this narrator knows the thoughts of all characters in the story. Let's look at this selection. Here we have the character of Harry Potter, and we have a family with the last name of Dursley. This sentence shows us that the narrator knows what the Dursleys are silently thinking. It says, "And if the Dursleys were unhappy to have him back for the holidays, it was nothing to how Harry felt." Did the Dursleys say that they were unhappy Harry was going to visit them? No. This was a silent thought they had, and the narrator knows this thought. The narrator knows what the Dursleys think. And what about Harry? He missed Hogwarts so much that it was like having a constant stomachache. Did Harry say these words out loud to someone? No, he didn't. This was a silent thought that Harry had in his mind, and the narrator knew this thought. So, if the narrator knows Harry's thoughts and the Dursleys' thoughts, that means it's third person omniscient. Practice 2. Question 1. What is the point of view? The answer is third person limited. Question 2. How do you know that? Well, first, this narrator uses third person pronouns he, they, and she. Another reason that we know this is a third person point of view is because this narrator is watching the story, but not in the story with the characters. And finally, how do we know that it's third person limited versus third person omniscient or objective? We know that because this narrator knows the thoughts of one character, the character Jack. How do we know that? The first sentences tell us. Let's reread them. "Great," said Jack. He hoped they would be safer away from the heart of Ado. Then maybe they could focus on their search for the secret. Here, we see silent thoughts and feelings that Jack is having. One of them is that Jack hopes his group will be safer when they leave this place called Ado. Another silent thought Jack is having is that maybe his group can then focus on the search for the secret. Did Jack say those words out loud? Did he tell someone else about this? No. Those thoughts were totally silent, but the narrator knew them. That shows us that the narrator knows what Jack is thinking. Now, what about the other characters, Annie and Basho? Jack, Annie, and Basho joined the crows crossing the bridge. Do we see any silent thoughts here that the narrator is telling us about? No, we don't. We just see here that the characters are crossing the bridge. And what about the last sentences about Annie? "What's that mountain?" said Annie. She pointed to a snow-capped mountain looming in the distance. Are we seeing any silent thoughts or feelings that Annie is having here? No, we're not. We're just seeing words that she says, and we also see her action where she's pointing to a mountain in the distance. So there's nothing silent that Annie is thinking that the narrator knows about. This means that the narrator doesn't know Annie's thoughts or Basho's thoughts, but the narrator does know Jack's thoughts. That's why this narrator is using third person limited point of view. Practice number 3 from the story Hoot. Question 1. What is the point of view? The answer is third person limited. Question 2. How do you know that? Well, first, how do we know it's third person versus second person or first person? We know it's third person because of the pronouns. This narrator uses third person pronouns his, he, and she. Remember, if there were a lot of first person pronouns like I, my, our, and we, that would mean first person point of view. If there were a lot of second person pronouns like you and your, that would mean second person point of view. But this narrator uses third person pronouns, so we know it's a third person point of view. Also, we know that this is third person point of view? Because this narrator is watching the story, but not in the story with the characters. This narrator is a little distant from the story and telling us about it. So that's a third person point of view. Finally, how do we know it's third person limited point of view versus omniscient or objective? We know this is third person limited because the narrator knows the thoughts of one character. Which character? There are 3 characters that this narrator tells us about: Roy Eberhardt, his mother, and his father. But the narrator only knows the thoughts and feelings of Roy. How do we know that? In these sentences, the narrator tells us that of all the places the Eberhardts had lived, Roy's favorite was Bozeman, Montana. Roy had never imagined anywhere so beautiful. Roy wanted to stay forever. Are these thoughts and feelings things that Roy said aloud, or were they silent? These were silent thoughts, but the narrator still knew about them. That proves to us that the narrator knows what Roy thinks and feels. Now, what about the mother? The narrator tells us his mother assured Roy that he would love Florida. Everybody in America wants to move there, she'd said. Do we see any silent thoughts and feelings of the mom? No. We just see things that she did and said. The narrator does not know any silent thoughts or feelings of the mother. And what about the father? Then, Roy's father had poked his head in the door and said, with somewhat forced enthusiasm, "And don't forget Disney World." Do we see any silent thoughts or feelings that the father has? No, we don't. We just see something that the father did and said. This narrator does not know the internal thoughts and feelings of the dad or the mom, but the narrator does know the internal thoughts and feelings of Roy. That's how we know that this narrator is using third person limited point of view, because this narrator knows the thoughts and feelings of one person. Practice 4 from the story Two Bad Ants. Question 1. What is the point of view? The answer is third person omniscient. Question 2. How do you know that? Well, we know that the narrator is using third person point of view versus second person or first person because of the pronouns. This narrator uses third person pronouns she, her, and they. We also know that this is a third person point of view because the narrator is watching the story but not in the story. But how do we know that the third person narrator is omniscient rather than limited or objective? We know that because this narrator knows the thoughts of all characters in the story. The characters in this story are the queen ant and all the other ants. This narrator knows all of their thoughts. Here are the sentences that show us that the narrator knows the thoughts of the queen ant. One ant had given the queen a sparkling crystal, and the narrator tells us nothing could make her happier than to have much, much more. Did the queen ant say this out loud? No. These were silent thoughts and feelings that the queen had, and the narrator knows about them. This means the narrator knows the queen's thoughts and feelings. The other ants understood. They were eager to gather more crystals. Did the ants say this? They did not. The narrator simply knows that this is what the ants were thinking. That's how we know that the narrator knows the thoughts of those ants. So, because the narrator knows the thoughts of all these characters, the point of view is third person omniscient. Point of view part 2, the end. Our lesson on types of third person point of view is complete. I hope this video helped you understand third person points of view and how to identify each one. Thank you for watching.
Now let's watch a video on point of view part 2. What is point of view? Point of view is what the character or narrator telling the story can see, his or her perspective. The author chooses who is to tell the story by determining the point of view. Depending on who the narrator is, he or she will be standing at one point and seeing the action. This viewpoint will give the narrator a partial or whole view of events as they happen. Many stories have the protagonist telling the story, while in others the narrator may be another character or an outside viewer, a narrator who is not in the story at all. The narrator should not be confused with the author, who is the writer of the story and whose opinion may not be those written into the narrative. Example points of view. Sandra wrote a story called 11. The point of view is the perspective of 11 years old Rachel. The story takes place at school during her birthday and is about her humiliation of receiving an old sweater. Throughout the story, she speaks in the first person point of view, sharing her thoughts as events unfold. Only today, I wish I didn't have only 11 years rattling inside me like pennies in a tin band aid box. Today, I wish I was 102 instead of 11, because if I was 102, I have known what to say when Mrs. Price put this red sweater on my desk. Types of point of view. First person. The example above with little Rachel is told in the first person point of view, meaning that we are seeing events through the eyes of the characters telling the story. Second person. In second person, the narrator is speaking to you. This isn't very common in fiction, unless the narrator is trying to talk to the reader personally. We see second-person point of view mostly in poems, speeches, instructional writing, and persuasive articles. Third person. With third-person point of view, the narrator is describing what's seen but as a spectator. If the narrator is a character in the story, then we are reading what he or she observes as the story unfolds. This narrator has three possible perspectives. 1. Limited. In limited third person, the narrator only sees what in front of him or her, a spectator of events as they unfold and unable to read any other character's mind. Omission. An omission narrator sees all, much as an all-knowing God of some kind. He or she sees what each character is doing and can see into each character's mind. This is common with an external character who is standing above watching the action below. Limited omission. Limited omission third-person narrator can only see one character's mind. He or she might see other events happening, but only knows the reason of one character's actions in the story. The importance of point of view. Point of view is important in a story because it helps the reader understand characters' feelings and action. Each character will have his or her own perspective, so whoever is telling the story will impact the reader's opinion of other characters and events. As in the example above, with Rachel and the red sweater, each point of view could be an entirely different story. Perhaps Rachel had embarrassed Sylvia horribly one day. On the sympathy we feel for Rachel in her perspective may change to sympathy for Sylvia if the point of view was switched. Additionally, reading the story from a character in the story versus an external character changes the amount of information a reader has as the story unfolds. With an omniscient third person, we can see everything before other characters do, which gives us forewarning about other events. With a limited third person, we are not allowed to see other events until the narrator does so. This may leave us with more surprises as we read. In conclusion, point of view is an important part of all writing. It makes stories interesting, gives research its serious tone, poems and persuasive works their personal tone, and allow readers to easily follow all writing. Keeping in mind the different types of point of view, when to use them will make your writing stronger.